welcome to our first Teaching Leaders panel discussion of this term, which is going to focus on talent. I'm really delighted to welcome you all here. We're actually holding two more events similar to this, although not in such prestigious and grand surroundings. One later this week in Leeds and one next week in Birmingham, all focusing on this topic of talent and actually how we can attract, develop and retain the best leaders in schools in the most challenging contexts. I should start really with a big well done for getting through security and getting here, and there will be, I'm told, water is on its way, and we're looking into the temperature, because I know after a brisk 20 minutes of discussion that everyone is probably quite parched. So that I'm told is on its way, and we will have some drinks afterwards at 7:30, so please, once the discussion, the debate is over, please do feel free to join us for that. But I would like to start by thanking Stephen Twigg for hosting us here in such a grand surrounding, and also for contributing as a panellist. And thank you to the other two panellists, Sue and Richard, who are going to speak. And I'll say a little bit more and introduce them as I go through my opening. But really, I wanted to start by welcoming you, as it's not often that we get such a fantastic group of leading head teachers, as well as our fellows and alumni. I'm delighted that a lot of our board members are here as well. It's an interesting time for us as an organisation to be having this discussion, because it was actually 5 years ago this week that we got our initial pilot funding to start Teaching Leaders, which 5 years ago started as 25 middle leaders in a small group of London schools working to really address our mission, which is to grow a movement of outstanding middle leaders to address education disadvantage. And 5 years on, we've grown now to a national movement of nearly 500 middle leaders in 250 schools, and that's growing all the time. But I think we wanted to really take this event as a point at which to mark and recognise the last 5 years. And so we've limited this event to heads who have really been the pioneers in supporting this programme and really taking it forward. So as much as it's a welcome, it's also a thank you to you for supporting us over the last 5 years. And we'll be doing a bit more to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the launch of Teaching Leaders, but we thought this was a really good point at which to mark that. The theme of talent, and if anybody is a keen tweeter, our Twitter hashtag for tonight is TLTalent, so please do feel free to tweet. We think that the theme of talent is really important, and that's a lot about what our Fellows programme is about and has been about. It's also the theme of our second Teaching Leaders Quarterly, which all of you have a copy of in your packs. The first quarterly focused really on how middle leaders can really drive impact in their schools through developing outstanding teaching in their departments and their teams, and that through that have a direct impact on our mission to really drive up pupil achievement in their schools. And I think that this theme of talent is directly related and also a very important one, because if we're not getting the best teachers and leaders and retaining them in the schools that you all work in, we won't be able to achieve our mission. We're all very much aware of the evidence and behind the impact of outstanding teaching and leadership and the impact that has on pupil achievements. And so this theme of talent and how we get that and harness it and get the most out of it in our schools is very much a key one. We as teaching leaders have recently, and I'm sure many of you have received numerous emails from me asking me to complete our recent survey. We've just run a talent survey looking at the question and perspectives and thoughts on this. And we've had responses from over 50 head teachers and nearly 200 middle leaders on the topic of talent. And I think one of the interesting things to come out of that was that there's a potentially new debate to be had on talent. I think that previously when we've looked at talent, we've been looking at how we can get the best teachers into the profession, so getting people into teaching and not going into other sectors. But I think as the growing, the quality of the teaching profession increases year on year, and we're getting the best generation of teachers in our schools, and as schools have increasing levels of autonomy, there is potentially a move and a trend towards actually more competition within the sector for talent and making sure that you keep the best talent in your schools. And it was interesting looking at the results of the survey that talent and retention of talent was a very key priority for all head teachers and all middle leaders alike. The survey results seem to show that actually it's you as head teachers who own that process, that it kind of really starts with you and the decision making gets, and the talent gets spotted from that point. as well as looking at other areas like lesson observation and exam results being other key indicators of high potential. There was broad agreement, though, that really kind of heads are the key decision makers. And there was also broad agreement between heads and middle leaders about what the drivers of retention are to really keep the most outstanding middle leaders staying in your school. And that was really, the drivers were they wanted additional responsibility, clear career progression, and strong professional development, which very much tallied with the Education Select Committee's report on attracting and retaining the best teachers. It was interesting that whilst financial reward featured, it wasn't at the top of the list. It was somewhere near the bottom, which I think is reassuring to all of us. But was interesting when we then went on to look at actually what head teachers and middle leaders reported their perceptions were of what heads were doing to retain talent. And there we saw that the drivers that we said about additional responsibility and professional development, they were reflected in the actions that all heads were doing. That was a very strong measure that heads used to retain staff. But we saw that actually there were some interesting things not coming through in as much as we thought they might do. So in some of the answers we found that financial reward was sometimes overused and perhaps didn't need to be used as much as it was. We also found that there was some emerging innovation that was underutilised, so ideas of secondment, mentoring as well, and that especially with Generation Y leaders, there was much more demand for a personalised approach to career progression and leadership development. And I think all of those might be interesting things that our different panellists will pick up on tonight. So I'm delighted to have our three panellists here this evening. I'm delighted to welcome Stephen Twigg, Shadow Education Secretary, who is really, especially in the last Labour government, played a very key role in driving forward London Challenge Teach First as Schools Minister. And Stephen's going to share with us a landscape overview, particularly picking up on the question of geography and about what opportunities the present system presents. Secondly, I'm going to hand over to Sue John, who is another person who had a key role to play in the London Challenge, and is the head of Lampton, a Teaching Leaders Board member, also an NLE and head of a teaching school, who is going to talk to us about the opportunities that are available to head teachers to really grab the current autonomy that's available in the system to focus on talent retention. And thirdly, I'm delighted to welcome Richard Marpham, who's head of strategy at Pret and Manger, and we wanted to bring in a corporate perspective, but perhaps one that doesn't focus as much on monetary reward to retain talent. And Pret really does, at its heart, think its people are its biggest assets, and we wanted to bring in Richard to talk about that perspective, especially how non-monetary reward has been a real key driver of their success. I'm going to ask each of the speakers to speak for 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll open up to you for questions and hopefully some lively debate. And I'd just like to finish again by welcoming you all. I hope the discussion's a rich one and look forward to lots of interesting questions. And I'll hand over now to Stephen to kick us off.